All right. Welcome, one and all, to another magnificent episode of Terran Tuesdays of The Black Knight and RH Snow, and hosted by myself. I'm here to press all the buttons, make sure nothing wonky happens, on at least on my end. But how are
Yeah.
you guys doing today? Black Knight, how about we start off with you? How are you doing today?
Uh, I'm well. It's been a tiring day, a really long day, and uh, it's quite eventful. I wrote a shortish poem. I edited. I did some beta reads, and I focused on wrapping up another chapter from my new Star Shutter book, the eighth from the series, and yeah, that was it. Pretty much. How
It
about you,
sounds like
Snow?
yeah, Snow, how are you doing today?
Oh, we're having a lot of fun over here. So, like, y'all know that we've been doing construction, and so my room is horrible. So I'm not showing myself because, oh my gosh, okay, so the floor is torn up. It's like I'm getting all my stuff out. I'm having to go through my entire. I don't know if you know this pain, but so I have clothes, and I really like my clothes. And even if I don't wear them for like 900 years or something, there's like a dress, and I would say, I remember when I wore this, and it was special. There was a special time, and so I keep it forever. Well, now I'm moving into my little tiny house. So we're building our really cool tiny house. Like it's like total. It's like it's going to be my bunker, and I have like radios and stuff. But so that means if I have radios and I have a wood stove and I have a giant, like drone that I can, do surveillance from my house or something, that means I don't have room for all my clothes. So I was like, I got to go through them, and I'm having to throw out my clothes. I'm having to not throwing them out. I don't. I'm going to send them for donation to my community center, so they can have money, so that we can still have a place to go vote and do stuff. And so, like, I'm having to get rid of my stuff, and y'all need to weep for me because I am just really having a hard time because there's some cute stuff in there, and I'm like, I'm not going to be able to keep all of it. And also, yes, I spent yesterday. Oh gosh, my son, his favorite teacher passed away, and she was like, not really old. She was actually young. It was really unexpected, and and so I spent that whole time crying, and then I wrote a big story about it. But I was like, I wrote it in all one sitting. I literally, when I write something for Substack, or if I write poetry, I just sit down and just write it all at once. It usually takes me less than 15 minutes. And I was just bawling all the way through it. Have you ever written something where you just cried the whole time? Have you ever done that?
Yeah, yeah. It's uh, I had, well, not actually cry, but like getting really emotional. I have a number of stories and chapters that I got quite like deeply invested, emotionally invested um, in them, and yeah, it's perhaps one of the more well known is a chapter from my third Star Shutter book, which is called Brotherhood. And those who read it, they know. I'm not going to go into details, but yeah, I know what you mean.
Oh, that's cool. No, so you did the manly thing where you do like just one single manly tear, but you don't really acknowledge it. You just turn your face to the wall and eat a snack or something. Is that how you deal with it? James, have you ever had that moment when you're writing?
Uh, the keyboard cries. We
That's
don't cry.
right. Right. What?
Yeah, the keyboard cries.
No, I.
I don't think I've ever had that moment.
What?
Um, No, I mean, come on. Have you seen my catalog of the stuff I write? It's not necessarily what I'd call emotionally impactful to a deep end degree. I got more action based stuff, more adventure oriented stuff. I don't necessarily, or I have not yet necessarily encountered the story that has drained
You
me of
will.
such emotion.
You will.
Yeah, you will. Yeah, you will.
You will.
Well, I was talking literally about his teacher, and so and for those of you who know, my son is also a science fiction writer. He is also a man living with autism. Has lived with autism since he was a very small child, and I homeschooled him for 12 years. And he found out that they were offering college courses at the local high school, and we of course knew a lot of people there, and he wanted to go take the college courses. He was going to go get his college degree before he was actually, and he did get it when he was, I think, 16 or 17, something ridiculous. Got his first degree, and so he wanted to go. and it was a big thing for us because he was dealing with some very, anybody who has really wrestled with sometimes with the joys and the struggles of autism knows that it can be awfully tough. He walked in there and she took him under his wing, under her wing. She literally changed his life. She made his life beautiful at that school. She made sure that nobody ever gave him a hard time. And to be fair, the guys and gals at Groesbeck ISD, my props. I love you, my people. If you're ever listening to this, I love all of you. And they made his life incredible. And as a result, he ended up going to a 4-year university, getting a full scholarship, things like that. And it all goes back to Molly Flatt's mama, Jill Flatt. Molly Flatt was one of his first dates ever. And now she's getting married too, but it's not to him. She's getting married to somebody else. But to go back and look at that and to find that Jill Flatt had passed away, I was just like, I bawled so much writing that thing. I was just crying the whole way. I was like, I could hardly see the keyboard. I had to stop and sob for like 3 minutes. And it was actually just an amazing piece. I don't know if it reads well or not. I have no idea because I was so busy crying I didn't have time to edit. So if you find a problem, let me know. But it's one of those things when you write something like that it really comes from the soul and you realize this is a human being that changed your life. Then yeah, it's easy to cry. It'll happen if you get to that place, you'll know.
All right, people, if you want that sort of deep, insightful energy, you can go ahead and follow RH Snow. You can find her link down below in the details section. Black Knight, I interrupted you. You were going to say something?
No, I was about to ask the same question that you asked me earlier while I was writing that about the story that you're writing something else, but you want to write another story. I wanted to ask Snow that if she had the same experience, probably.
Snow, have you ever had that one? I asked Black Knight earlier today, and I guess it's going to be the stream, the podcast question. Have you ever been in the midst of writing a story, but then you couldn't get another story off your mind, and you were drawn to write that one instead, but you just had to finish the one that's right in front of you?
Well, because I work on inspiration, and I am a pantser to a certain degree. So for me, I'm saying this honestly, this is not me making up something. Writing is like breathing. You have to do it. That's been that way ever since I was very small. I first wrote my first poetry probably when I was 7. I still have it. And I had always, and there's something about putting the words on a page and you see them, they are so visceral when they come from that space. It's just who I am. And so I find when I have a story on my mind, and I have other stories I'm working on. As you know, I'm writing Watch of the Dams as a series. But when that kind of feeling comes over me, I usually write the story as a short story. I do have some short stories on my feed there. I find short stories to be harder than actually a novel because there's a certain limited space that you have to make this idea occur. So I'm more likely to write an essay. I do have at least 3 short stories on my feed that I did that are special to me, and they came to me like that. Actually, I had to stop everything and work on that short story because it's in some ways it is like bursting into tears, and I don't know if you have that problem, but if you're going to cry, you got to go ahead and do it. You might have to wait, and this is me speaking from personal experience, and it can happen to men, it can happen to women, but when you really feel it coming on, you got to do something. And I've had this happen in the workplace one time, and it's the most horrifying thing ever because you're trying to be cool. And I'm not, already don't look cool to begin with. I'm 4'11". I look like a munchkin, and I'm not really very intimidating. So if somebody's yelling at me about something they didn't like, it has a tendency to go badly. And I'm also a crier. And I've said this before. This is the worst thing about my life. I will literally cry at the freaking drop of a hat. It is you try not to do it. I try not to do it. The more you try, the worse it's going to get. If you try to hold it in, you're going to make this monkey noise. And you'll make this horrible noise and it'll all come out. Well, the same thing with writing. I have to do it. If I try to hold it in, it's not going to happen for me. So I will stop everything else I'm working on. I let it all out in one epic gush, literally smash it out. It'll take maybe the longest I've ever taken was, I think, 2 to 3 days to write something. Just poured it all out, got it done. And I find that I do better than I can go back to my other story. And that one thought is taking place. And in fact, that is really how Substack for me got started. Was I went straight to that format for my Substack, because that's where all my short pieces basically are, my poetry, my poems and my haikus and all those things. They just come on me. I magically do them, and I'm done usually within 30 minutes. But I let it out. I think if you try to hold off on telling a story, if you have that passion and you don't act on it somehow, if nothing else, write the arc. You can sit down and write an arc for another.
That's some decent advice right there. Just write the arc.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you're on a deadline. It's kind of interesting because for me, I got the muse to write something else. Well, currently in the middle of editing one story, and currently while writing Glimmerleaf at the same time. It's like, am I really want to juggle 3 stories? So what I did,
understand you so well.
Oh, that's harsh.
So what I did, because I rarely just come up with stories, I can come up with the entire world. So that's what I kind of did. So I wrote a variety of like field logs and mission statements and mission briefs, and just have about 5 or 6 of them. And then I turned them into audio logs, and then I just kind of get it out of me. I like to turn things into audio logs. Make a multimedia if I can, kind of gives it a bit of a broader reach. And I think they just, when you really take documentations, particularly fantasy based, and lace them with bits of information that you otherwise wouldn't get of the overall world, so that way you kind of piece everything together yourself. I've always kind of liked that in both video games as well as some forms of horror. So I thought this would be kind of fun, turn them into just audio logs. So on the back end, over time, I don't know what I'm going to do with them, but I'm just going to keep making audio logs here and there of a variety of things going on in this world and just see where it goes. Maybe one day I'll release them, maybe I won't. Who knows?
I think it's fantastic because we so often point towards, I got to get this out and get it released. When you have a story like that, it builds and grows that way. That's where the Silmarillion comes from. Tolkien is not looking at, I've got to get this printed out, I'm going to make this into a form. He is doing his notes, and that's where his world building is. Think of world building as your own fan fiction for your own work. So when you do that, you're literally writing fanfic for your own stories. You can ship your characters, you can do all that stuff that doesn't fit in the book. Put that in your own fanfic and call it your notes. You can release that later if you want to. Now, a lot of times your story will suddenly veer off from that or it'll go away from it, but you've already explored this. Those good chunks that are in there, you pull them out, put them in your story. The things that don't necessarily fit, but you just love, you keep it in your notes. My notes got so extensive that's how I ended up with the World Guide, the Purgatory Papers. And it actually is incorporated into the book as well. The Purgatory Papers become a dossier that one of the characters will keep for their intelligence on the revolution. And so it's actually written into the story. I ended up writing into it, so it became a story within a story, and it's very meta because it folded back on itself. But I actually use that when I have a reviewer or somebody wants to see what the book's about and they need notes or they need some sort of description. I go ahead and just release the Purgatory Papers. It's more there for me than for anything else, but it's in there, and because it's separate from my series, a lot of people don't see it. It's over to the side. You'll only see it if you go to my author page. But I kept it there as the World Guide because the notes were so great, and I just kept writing those off the page. I would think of a character, and I would immediately go in here and just throw this all in. And so it was. I think that writing from that place of joy and inspiration is so incredibly important, and it's still important to keep doing your main task. It's important to be there. So writing it in those little chunks, the notes and the audio. I love the audio files. I think that's a fantastic idea. Doing that makes such a difference because you are still in that place of joy. You're not putting it off. And I'm really feared that, when those kind of things happen, when we put it off too long, the joy becomes lost, that excitement becomes lost, and with it, the heart of that story that was trying to be born will be forever lost. So never put off something that truly is on your heart. You can still work on your main characters, your main story, but you need to write something. Write the arc, write the notes, make a song, whatever it takes, do it. Get it out there so you can go back and revisit it in your own spare time, and then it will come back to life at the time you need it.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I did. I wrote a couple of draft notes, and my draft notes, they usually work like blocks of Lego blocks.
Oh yeah.
And um, I assemble them in a certain way. It's like they might initially look a bit disjointed, but it's just like when you're playing Tetris. You have different blocks and you turn them so everything would fit, and then you have like this line, and then another one, and then another one. So um, this is what I did because it's something that kind of I felt that I needed to do it, and they were not like some huge notes, like small notes, but still um, specific ideas which are born from this inspirational feeling that you have about certain place in your world, or it may be just a unique short story, or a character that you've just conceived the outlines of. But it's much better, even if it's a small note, a tiny note. If it's good to have on your hand, because one day you will need it. But trust me, you will. Um, so yeah, that's the thing. And let's focus on the theme of
Bringing us back. We got all excited. God,
yeah.
I'm topic. I'm sorry. It's my fault. I'm sorry. I'm bad.
The topic for today's episode.
Indeed.
And yes, and today we have a classic topic, and an always interesting one. It looks like we have our friend Frederick in the chat.
Oh, hello, Frederick.
Yeah, we have a lot of good friends in the
Hello,
chat.
Mac.
Oh gosh, I haven't checked the chat yet. I need to.
Hello, Wrangler.
There's Wranglers in here. Mac is in
That's
here.
all.
Is in here.
Mac, I
That's not-
loved your stuff. I loved it. I sent you an email.
Right. So today we're going to be discussing heroes,
Yeah.
which I've been writing a lot of heroes lately, and a variety of heroes. And that's actually one thing that kind of got me interested back into writing in general. I did a little bit of writing when I was young, but nothing anywhere near serious compared to today. And it was honestly, I think, just the lack of real heroes we're really getting in today's media. It seems like there has to be a dissection of heroes, and everybody you see
Deconstruction.
yes, the dissection, the deconstruction, tearing them apart. And there may have been a time when we were flooded with them to the point that it was stale, but now it's like something that it's harder and harder to find is a good hero, which is a shame, because I know that the hero has a long and journeyed history. And I want to shoot it over to R.H. Snow, because I know you always got a good rant to start off with.
Let's go for the little bit of the history. And we talk about that cycle that we go through. And what you see is it's actually the baby boomers, which are a little bit ahead of me. There's nothing wrong with being a baby boomer. So if you're a boomer here right now, I love you and you're awesome. And I'm coming in right behind you. I was born in 1962. I'm actually born to a World War II veteran. So technically, I'm a boomer. But in actuality, I was born 20 years after most of them were born, because I was born to him late in life. So I have some things are in common with them. But I come in and we're riding that wave of their childhood. They're looking at heroes, and they are absolutely inundated with the golden age of heroes. They're inundated with Superman and Batman. I mean, you even have Spidey come out at this point, and the heroes were so replicated everywhere, just so many heroes of epic proportions. And you don't have just them, but you also have the heroes in their real lives, their fathers who had gone off to World War II, and their mothers who had, kept the home front going at home. They're literally saturated with real and imaginary heroes. So as they grow up, and we have these are the writers that are going to affect your childhood now. So they grow up and they become jaded. They become part of that thing that you go through where you find out your hero, your dad really did do something wrong, or maybe he didn't satisfy that it was something in your heart. Maybe your mother falls from grace in your eyes. Those are our first heroes. Then you have the other heroes, and it becomes stale, not because they're stale, but because you grew up and you pick up your own thing and you go, well, that's not really true, and I don't believe it anymore. That's where the deconstruction comes in. And it's this whole generation, this massive generation that literally dominates the landscape. We have nothing else like it until probably in the late 80s, when we actually have a swell come through that I saw occur was in the demographics. I see a group of people that suddenly people had babies again. And as they came through, they made this massive impact on the culture. Well, they're wrestling with their own mortality and their own jaded worldview. They go into their 30s, they're in their 40s, and they're writing stories for everyone. That's what you get saturated with. What I got saturated with, the dark, deconstructed hero, the Sundance Kid. You had stories like My Name is Trinity, where it's literally the dirtiest cowboy on fire. If you've never seen My Name is Trinity, it's great. You have darker heroes like the Man with No Name and Pale Rider. You have these are it's a very dark time. Even the heroes have a dark, menacing edge. The Legend of Billy Jack. My donkey, who was named Billy Jack, is named for him because he can kick like Billy Jack, and and it's still a sweet boy. I love Billy Jack, and so that's a very dark story too. It's a story about a hero that literally is trying to suppress his actually a great story from that perspective of a Vietnam veteran that comes home and he's trying to fit in with this very peaceful and loving community, but the hero eventually will come out and will destroy things. These are the people that are writing for you, so you're saturated with this as they're coming through their own dark period. That's what the younger people are getting. So as a result, there are no real heroes. There are no stand up and cheer heroes until we get to Star Wars. And I know there were others. There were some out there. The Last Starfighter as well, actually from that same period. Star Wars resonated so much because it had a real hero, and I'm talking about a whatever you call it, New Hope. I don't care. The rest of it can go. That was Star Wars. It is a hero with a heroic ending, and the sound of the trumpets, and everybody suddenly came back to life. But there was a need for this. It satisfied something so visceral within a generation that had literally been denied this. And now you have that same group that came through as a jaded people go back, look at it, and go, oh, maybe there really is a place for this. Now they're in that place where the nostalgia kicks in, and they remember their father, as I write in my own Substack, the throne room, revisiting the throne room, where they can't take this away from me. They can't destroy Star Wars so much that they can ever erase the memory of my father jumping up at the very end when he blows up the Death Star. My father jumps up and shouts with his hands up in the air because he's a World War II veteran here, and it looks like the ship's guns that were fighting the enemy, and he suddenly is taken by this image. And they remember their own fathers too, the same generation, and suddenly this brings back this rush now of heroes again. Conan the Barbarian, I told y'all to expect me to mention him because he's very important to me, because as I'm a young in my first marriage, the one thing my ex-husband and I very much shared was D&D. I was very much into this culture, D&D and barbarians and everything else. I read all 17 of the paperbacks that had Conan the Barbarian in them, with Rosetta on the cover, of course, and it just an enormous influence on me. Suddenly the heroes start to come back, but now you're going through the same deconstruction again. We see this cycle, but this time it seems different. It's because so much of it is inorganic. It is created to destroy culture, not just to. When we see these dark periods in history where Hemingway and others, as they come out of the Great War of the World War I, or the darker period of Death of a Salesman, things like that come out of the veterans coming back from World War II, or the boomers getting out of their hero phase, there are cultural cycles, but they still have an element of humanity. There's still greatness in it. Willie Loman dying becomes so devastating because you can see the heroism that's somewhere inside of him, and it's being crushed to death. Well, now we go past that. We go past this point to where this seems so inorganic. It's not about writing about a real life experience or about real bitterness. It's not Rambo going off the rails because he's being affected. It is a cultural revolution that is being disguised as writing. It's being disguised as literature. So you're erasing heroes. You're destroying heroes. It's not merely deconstructing them. It's the destruction of culture. So that's why there's such an angry response to this. It doesn't replace it with anything. It doesn't replace it with the bitter hero who's riding away, like in Billy Jack, where he's literally trying to not be this person and he still is. There's no humanity in it. It's just we're going to crush anything you ever loved. We're going to destroy the character you love. We're going to destroy heroes. If you have a hero, whether it's in real life or it's in literature, we're going to destroy it. We're tearing down your statues. We're doing all of these things, and you can't stop us. And we are going to erect a throne of dirt, as it says from Johnny Cash singing the Nine Inch Nails song. It hurt. This is throne of dirt. They literally have replaced it with nothing except garbage, and that is why you see the rise of indies.
Yeah, a pile of dirt or a giant poo.
Yeah, actually, the original it says a throne of poop, but Johnny Cash actually changed it. He changed it on the fly. He did talk to I think it was Trent Reznor when he because Trent I believe wrote the song. And Johnny Cash changes it because he said it is so powerful when he sings it. Actually, to me, it's Johnny Cash's version is the ultimate version. That now there's a dark hero right there. When we talk about the darkness of it, there is a man deconstructed by life. He runs his hand across that piano, and you feel the regret oozing out of his hands, the life choices he made. And I love Johnny Cash. I've studied him extensively. He's one of my heroes, because he overcomes an incredible addiction, and he wrestles with it all of his life, and yet he will overcome his addictions to drugs and alcohol and to other things, but it will remain in his life in the forms of the broken hearts and the broken souls left behind, because you cannot have that kind of lifestyle and it doesn't affect the other members of your family, which is why I'm so passionate about recovery and addiction in my book. I wanted to portray it in a manner that would be realistic. Johnny Cash is that hero. He's just deconstructed by life, but he's still a hero in that point. There's something heroic in the broken man facing down his demons. There's nothing of that in our present corporate literary culture because it's not allowed. You're not allowed to have those heroes. So that is why we are writing them. That's why we have such a hunger, and they cannot stop us from creating our own heroes. And that's one of the things I wanted to touch on today is how we create our heroes and what we're doing and what to expect as we move through it. Do we have to stay on the template of some kind? I don't really think so. I think that we need to write from the heart what is truly heroic to us in the place we are in and what it means to us. And when we do that, heroic figures, whether they are of the traditional kind that appeals to a young person seeking the heroic life, or to a person looking back on it and realizing what heroism really is. We need to write it from the heart, and then those heroes will arise from us.
Well said indeed. And you actually have a very interesting backdrop in your literature because it's post-apocalyptic. So to be exploring the hero in the post-apocalypse, I think is probably like one of the most punctuating settings where a hero can find themselves, because it's a lawless land where you don't necessarily have the comfortability to say, well, someone else will see to the trouble, someone else will see to the issue. But that's what gives it that big punctuation. That's where the hero comes into play. Somebody who brings a sense of order to absolute chaos, and does it for the sake of essentially appropriate reasoning, because that's a big portion. Is the hero does it for the sake of justice, for the sake of order, for the sake of this is what's right. Yeah, and that's where you're pulling from. Like you mentioned, those old school heroes of the past, the idols of the past, the people who came before us. A lot of that is very old school. It wasn't that long ago I actually started rewatching a television show that I really enjoyed, and what I ended up liking about it was that it had a lot of those old school vibes. Like somebody would do something incorrect and everybody would be like, well, that in itself is a great shame to bear and to see. Compared to kind of what we absorb today, where yes, there are those gray areas, but when we want to visit these fantastical lands, we also want to explore these fantastical people that we may be able to look up to and say, we can arise beyond these gray areas. And we like to see that. We want to root for a fictional hero that is above these gray areas or wrestles with them, yet overcomes and stands as as a beacon of what's to be, maybe for the other fictional characters, or also to give people a sense of hope. Because that's what a lot of our media really does, whether we know it or not. It's something that I thought of actually recently. We'll watch something like a movie, or something that's meant to entertain us, a piece of literature, music, all forms of entertainment. And at times we'll come across something that offends us, and society will tell you that it is okay for them to offend, but you not to be offended. And I was thinking about that. I was like, but why is it so offensive in general sometimes when you unexpectedly come across something and you're like, oh, well, I liked it up to this point, and then maybe it started getting political. Maybe it started getting too annoying, or it nagged too much in one direction. Or even to me at times, something that offends me about bad literature is an overabundance of cliches that completely flatten the story. So you can find offense in a whole lot of ways in literature. And to me, the reason that, or I should say, like the minor revelation I had, is the reason it can be offensive sometimes is because what entertains us is a personal thing. It's very detailed of those things that we want to give our time to, give our emotion to be quote unquote entertained by, because we carry those stories with us. We think about them. They may affect us. They may change us in a lot more ways. I'm sure modern day psychology has found out over time. And they have become a magnificent piece of propaganda to be held in a multitude of ways. And that hero, I think that hero missing in itself is affecting society in a grander way than we like to believe.
Oh, indeed, it is. I can draw from uh, let's say our history here, which I always come back to, especially when tragic circumstances and heroes are concerned, because we've had plenty of it. It was like a really really turbulent and sad uh, um, history, and especially the more recent history in let's say the Ottoman period, where you've had this complete destruction of most um, cultural aspects of the nations here, and you are not allowed to read your books because they've been burned. You are not, therefore, you're not aware of the kings of and queens of old. You don't know the heroes who've won battles, and because of said heroes you are even alive. Then there comes a time where you had this very very powerful oral tradition of the folk songs and tales, which there were, even though everything was suppressed and people were killed, um, the the storytellers and these in many cases really old tale tellers, which they were old men and women who would travel between villages, and they would collect the old stories, and especially about heroes, and they would tell them to especially to young people, so they would know. And there were a lot of really retold stories, a bit, let's say, elaborated in certain cases, but that was done to because the period was quite extreme, and they just wanted to preserve this heritage, this heroic heritage. And thus some kings and some generals and some wise men and priests became larger than life, and certain older heroes, like from the much earlier medieval times, they became also almost Batman like, Superman like. They were able to lift horses, rip trees in two, and hurl giant rocks, and their swords could cleave armored men in two. They could shoot their bow. They could shoot their bow over the horizon and such and so forth. So it was, and of course, it was like the prevailing theme was justice, and in many cases that was vigilante justice, because the law wasn't actually on your side. You are actually oppressed by oppressed. It's mildly said oppressed, and so yeah, we have this tradition, and I'm sure that all across the world, in situations like this, there is a deep need. It's something which is it's within your soul, and you draw upon it as if it's, well, not if, it is holy might, and you draw upon it and then reshape it and use it as a vessel of hope, so people would try to build a better future.
I think you're touching on something that we've forgotten, because we're so isolated from each other in this current age. And I say this because we're following up from the COVID years, where they literally tried to lock down the earth, and people are still getting back into the habit of reaching out to each other, of being around each other in a group. But even so, the prior 10 years were absorbed by the internet. We experience each other from afar. We don't have the old people and the young people in the same room anymore a lot of times now. And this is a very important point. When you build a distrust between generations, where it's actually cultivated, and this is part of that whole cultural destruction, is you build a distrust between generations. Everyone's a predator. Whether you're a young person, that young person's going to come up and he's going to knock me in the head. He's going to take my purse, or he's going to try to steal from me. Or an old person, they're just there. They want money, and they're just rich, and all they do is take up space and breathe when I need what they have. This is a planned thing, but you no longer have those stories flowing from generation to generation. You don't get a chance to hear what actually happened. And when you are very young, you don't get a chance usually to go out and be super heroic. The reason why, because people don't let you go on those scenes. They have you in school, or they have you someplace that's safe, and you see something happening down the road, and your mom doesn't go, quick, go grab the gun. You're going to go shoot that robber. Your mom usually won't say that. And instead, you have to watch while other people do it. And you may only see it on the news. Maybe that's if the news tells you at all that there was a hero on scene. You'll hear about the bad guy, but you won't hear about the hero. And so you don't have someone to tell you about these heroes. You don't have the news spreading those heroic tales. That's why that's why human interest stories are so important. Why when if we have real journalism, we have those human interest stories of people doing amazing things. They are becoming the bards of the generation, and we used to have journalists who did that, and I hope that we still do. I do have ones that actually have covered stories that we've had out here about recovery and fires that happened. But you have to see in your own life something that reflects that, whether it's in literature or in the people you know. And when you see those heroes, you see the transformation. It is hard to describe to someone who has never seen it what takes place when people do more than you expected them to do, when they become more than you ever expected them to be. I don't know if you've seen it in your life. I had a deacon of mine who was working out in the yard. I was working on a car with his grandson, who was in his I believe his older teens at that time. The car actually got kicked out from under him. It literally kicked it over. He couldn't actually, it fell right on his chest. The wheels were off, so the whole thing just came down and smashed him. It fell on crushing his chest. His grandson literally reached down and lifted up this truck. It's not just a little car, it's a truck. And he lifted it. Little skinny guy. He's not really super big. I mean, he was big enough, but he was not what you consider a beefy, muscly man. He lifted the truck off of his grandfather and pulled him out from under it at the same breath. It was a heroic act. And Brother Marion, when he saw it, he couldn't get over Adam's grandson's name, his heroism, that he was able to physically have this transformation that allowed him to have this thing take place. Sometimes you see it in a way where it's not so much a physical transformation, but it's a spiritual transformation. When you see a person undergoing some sort of terrible event in their life, and you walk by the room and you see them just kneeling by a bed with a dying person in it, and they are praying, and they're trying so hard to just be themselves in that moment and to not lose everything. And there is an extraordinary heroism in that moment when a person is going through a terrible fire of the soul and everything is being lost except what the true remains of the human spirit. And you can see it. It's coming through the fire, and they're being transformed. Same thing happens on a deathbed when that person that you love is passing from you, and you get to see them in all their glory and beauty, but they're just what looks to other people like a husk dying on a bed, but you know what they were and what they have been. There are spiritual transformations that occur. There are physical transformations that occur. And there is an epic scale of this when you see groups of people. And I've talked before about being a firefighter, and I don't speak about it very often, but because I try not to talk about events that I've been on because I respect the privacy of the people, but there are public events that I've been to. When the West explosion happened, this in West Texas, there was a giant explosion. A fertilizer plant blew up. We still don't really know the reason why. And 14 people, 3 of them whom I actually physically knew, there were people that were going to at my class with me for EMT school, were in the West explosion. We heard it from the church. Actually felt the shock wave, and I'm 40 miles away. We heard it. We immediately left. We arrived an hour and a half later, and the ammonia cloud was still over the scene. I could smell it. It actually burned my throat as we went in. And you could see it roiling, and we're going in with groups of people coming in behind us, the lights flashing. I have my team with me, and I'm a trainee as an EMT. And we get on scene, and there's candles because the lights are out, and the community center has been opened up, and the nursing homes had been evacuated into the community center, but everything was out, and we had to move these people. We immediately got organized. In the middle of the dark, with no air moving, with people bleeding, with one man dying, and I sent the chaplain over to take care of this man as he passed. And others were bleeding and wounded, and we're moving them to the helicopters. There becomes an epic scale when you see hundreds of people moving in unison to save the dying or the lost. And it is hard to describe the transformation, but there is a spirit over the place that cannot be captured by a camera. It cannot be captured by anything other than another human spirit. We see these things in real life, and trying to describe them becomes the duty of the bard. It becomes the duty of those who have experienced it and witnessed it. to translate it into a form, whether it is a fantasy character or a Western hero, whether it is the deconstructed man, as I have in Watcher of the Damned, where he's actually is a deconstructed hero. He is being reconstructed in the true form. He's beaten down by life. But when we see it in real life, we have a duty to bear witness as testimony of what heroism looks like. It cannot be crushed by any cultural revolution. It cannot be erased unless we allow it. And so we have a duty to share these things. When you have witnessed heroism, whether it's on a one-to-one scale of your mother having to bear the burden alone as a single mother, or your father trying to move forward after a terrible divorce, or a firefighter who's actually doing something to save you, a doctor who saves your life, bear witness. You have seen it. You've seen it somewhere. You will recognize it when you do see it, and you need to bear the testimony. That is your calling as a writer, as an artist, as a musician, to bear witness to the glory. When you do it, you will share that, and it will change lives, because you will give someone else the hope that they too can be the hero.
Definitely, it's an average, ordinary, everyday hero that may, to some, just be going about their job or their day. Because we have been talking a lot about we've been talking a lot about the fictional hero, but that actually reminded me of something that I was experiencing the other day, because I do like enjoying a horror story every now and then, even though I don't think I've heard a horror story that's actually scared me in years. Most of them just frustrate me or offend me because of how cliche or bad they can be. But then I came across one that wasn't about some eldritch beast or gigantic monster or something lurking in the dark, but it was about someone lost down a road and then running into sketchy everyday people. And I thought that's where a lot of untapped horror, untapped heroism, untapped thrills come from in this fantastical world of ours, because we truly do like to surround ourselves by large portions of fiction, but a lot of that is inspired by simply what is your everyday heroes, the people who go out of their way, the people who do it for the sake of doing something that is right because it's the right thing to do. And then, flip it on the other side. What is more scary? What might be lurking in the dark of some eldritch beast you never seen, or of someone who may actually harm you, who may actually pull a knife out on you and try to take something you own? The true villains, the true heroes of our world actually exist. And yes, our fantastic writings kind of help bring that to a very fantastical and consumable place. But to a degree, it has to be grounded in that reality. You have to have those characters that you could understand, because the true heroes are those that are around us every day. And without that essence of truth, that's where the uncanny valley starts coming in. That's where your cookie cutter Marvel hero comes in. That replaceable thing is the absence of that humanity where heroes originate from.
Yeah, it's much better to have a truly inspirational hero who is based. Maybe it's a fantasy hero. It's a hero in science fiction, but they would be based on someone real, or at least partially inspired by someone real. Some because if you know, and you guys know, I mean, we've talked about it, that sometimes reality is much stranger than fiction, and especially when we go back to let's say to the Second World War. We had such extraordinary uh, feats achieved by people who many of them they did not assume themselves to be in any way, shape, or form superior. They were just there, and they were doing their duty, just like you mentioned earlier when you shared this instance of that terrible tragedy. It's when something like that happens, um, then you will most definitely uh, see someone, or at least one ordinary human, quote unquote, ordinary human, who will achieve such extraordinary feats that you probably will not believe your eyes, and and then it's something like in our days. This is something that we have probably I have. I'm sure that you probably also faced, and there are some people who consider these like more down to earth heroes to be unrealistic, because they cannot and will not conceive any self sacrifice or selfless heroism. Um, that's because they're projecting their hollow inner core upon everything, even the fantastic, um, and especially if it's inspirational and heroic. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why Tolkien mentioned that thing about evil not being able to create. It's not just evil. It doesn't have to be evil. It's it's someone who has allowed themselves to become so empty that they're not able to actually have fun. And these perhaps are like the gray people. These are perhaps the most dangerous people, because when certain authoritarian regimes arise, these are the people who actively support said regimes, and they are the order followers. They're just following orders. Yes, yes, we're guarding that concentration camp. We're just following orders. That's fine. It's okay that somehow absolves us of um, all the sin that we've committed. So it's these are the people who uh, cannot stand anything heroic. They are often those who viciously uh, destroy and deconstruct and reimagine, um, and basically wipe out everything that could be inspirational and hopeful.
And I think you're really touching on this thing. Is we say they're destroying the heroes, and people, writers especially, now whether they're, especially when they're organic, they create their heroes based on what they know. We write what we know. There's no other way around it. We see the world through a certain lens, and sometimes we're able to imagine ourselves as a character and see it through that very unique lens, which is totally unlike the writer, but it's still a portion of us that we are able, because we have allowed ourselves to grow that part of our brain. However, writers that are not there from that vein, when they're only there to follow orders, to do what they've been told, they are creating a hero in their own image. What do their heroes look like? The ones that they're trying to get you to follow? Well, it changes from age to age. And I love antique books. Absolutely adore them. Not all of them are great. Let me be honest. I got a lot of ephemera, and there are books that were written for boys and girls. There were some that were written just for women. There were some that were written for men, but especially for young people. There was a tendency to over preach. Especially, they would make this wonderful story, and then they would immediately have some sort of. It would actually insert a real sermon right in the middle of it. This is like in the 1850s and things like that. There were other stories that were absolutely grand. They were just incredible. That Mark Twain, you could morality play without having to preach to you about it. But so we see a lot of that in the oldies, where a person, I've got to tell this story, I've got to teach this lesson. But unlike Aesop's fables, where it really was kind of cute and made sense, they would just get too preachy. Well, that shows. You can kind of feel it. Even in the old days, you could feel it when they were just, when it might be a great story, but it ends up being about how I want you to act. Now you feel that. You know it when you see it. And then you realize if your grandma told you that and she's telling you how she wants you to act because she's telling you a Grimm's fairy tale about you don't go and eat poison apples from old ladies you don't know, then you're trying to learn something. It's a story, and it's a sermon. We recognize sermons. We recognize people trying to tell us how to act. A great sermon inspires you to act. I'm married to preachers. I gave birth to a preacher. I have them in my family. You can't swing a cat around here without hitting a preacher. It's just the way it is. And so they're everywhere in Texas. They're just like, hey, how are you doing today, preacher? And then somebody else goes, hey, how are you doing? They're preachers everywhere. A great preacher will make you inspired, but you still know it's a sermon. It's a story about how people should act. Well, cultural destroyers, the people who want to destroy your culture, are trying to remake you in their image, not in God's image, not in a heroic image. They're trying to make you what they think is the right way for you to act, and we recognize it. There's a reason when you say that uncanny valley appears, it's because they are preaching, but it's not coming from a place of love. It's not coming from, I want you to live longer so you don't go, float downstream and die. Don't go, putting on the red shoes if you don't know where they're going to lead you. There might be those dancing shoes. You never know. But that's not that place they're coming from. They're telling you that you're a bad person, and I want you to act this way or we will destroy you. So their heroes are weak. Their heroes, the ones let's put it this way, they're protagonists. We'll call them protagonists because they aren't really heroes. Their protagonists are weak. They easily capitulate to societal norms. And I'm talking here about their societal norms, not yours. They do what they are told by whatever moral authority, especially a governmental moral authority.
Oh,
they usually hate religion. They're not just religion, they hate God.
Then they are bootlickers. Almost always they are bootlickers.
Everything is bad except the thing that they are following. Everyone in the story is a villain except for them and the people that they are following. Now, we see this in other stories. We see things where there's this great, overwhelming villain, and there's only one man standing against a million. But that's because that person is talking of an actual heroic event. They're speaking from a place of joy, of inspiration. Cultural destroyers that we see, the corporate culture that is attempting to replace heroism around the world with an obedient, slaved population, is teaching that the protagonist must do as they are told. The greatest person is a person who does what the government tells them to do, whatever their governing body is. And that good people won't, in quotes, do these bad things like raise children or save a family or be a toxic masculine person. They won't run into a fire without a reason. They won't save somebody that's a bad person. You read these stories and you realize that they are preaching from a place of hatred of your culture, not a place of love for wanting you to do better, but a sermon about how horrible in your culture is and how much they hate you. That's a sermon of hate, and we are seeing these sermons of hate being revealed in their writings and in their stories, their protagonists that they're giving us, whether it's destroying a beloved character that everyone loves in fantasy, or tearing down an actual character of a person who had once been considered a hero in your culture. And this is happening all over the world, not just in the U.S. Or if it is replacing everything with this milquetoast, beaten down human who only does exactly what they are told and what is expected, and anything else is immediately a bad thing. And for goodness sakes, don't ever talk about revolution against those who hate God or Don't talk about a revolution against those who are communists. Don't ever talk about a revolution about those things, because that's bad now. That's the only heroes. The only real revolution can always be on a leftist progressive. And this is nothing. I have so many of my readers. I love them very much, and they are on the left. But it's because they're the old school leftists. They actually believe in the rights of an individual. They actually believe in the rights of the oppressed. They're not there to prop up a corporate dictatorship.
Oh, they hate the corporate dictatorship.
That's right. The true leftist, the true progressive liberal, wants to speak their mind. They aren't going to tell you that you have to be good and do what the government says. The true true progressivist believes that the rights of individual are paramount, and that's where this all goes wrong, because this is not really coming from a progressivist landscape. It's not really coming from a place of wanting to help people. It's coming from telling you how bad you are, how bad your culture is, and I want to give you a sermon on what I think you should do, or I will kill you or put you in jail. That's a bad feeling, and that's why you hate these stories. There's no joy in it. There's no love in it. There's no love for the character itself. There's just a hatred for the person they're preaching to. And when you see that, you know. So when you find those progressivist heroes, when they're told in a place of love, a leftist hero, a progressivist hero, when it's truly told from a place of love, they actually do become inspiring. You can't help it. You still like them. You still want to read about it. We have to fight back against corporate censorship of culture from around the world by telling our own stories and by telling the things that we know are heroic to us from a place of love. It has to be from a place of love for the person who is reading it and the person who is writing it. If you do not love both things, because as we say, you have to love God and love your neighbor as you love yourself. It's a three-legged stool. You cannot have any of those parts missing. To love oneself, to love where you are coming from, even if you know that you've done bad things, that maybe you have sinned somewhere, you must go and find forgiveness. You only do that when you love yourself enough to want that. When you want to be better, you want to be free. You want to be free from your addiction or your sin or whatever it is that's holding you back, that's destroying you. You actually love yourself enough to go and find that forgiveness and to go find the place where you will be free and you will suddenly become the man or the woman you've always been meant to be. That is a place of love. You can only write a true hero from a place of love for yourself, from you as a human being, and knowing that there's something greater than just you in the world. Because to think that you're the only thing that matters and that all that matters is your experience of what you want is called sociopathy.
Oh yeah.
And there are very high sociopaths. There are high functioning sociopaths. In fact, this is an element of Watcher of the Damned, which is, I won't be a spoiler about it, but can you be a high functioning sociopath and still do good things? Can you actually overcome some of your feelings? If you're self aware, can you know what you're doing and try to form yourself into a person that can somehow benefit humanity? The answer is actually yes. But it has to come from a place of love. And that's why when we just respond to culture, when we just respond to lash out and hate, this is what I hate about your culture, this is what I hate about the left, this is what I hate about the right, those stories will eventually fail. They will feel flat because there's no heroism in it. There's no inspiration. When we come from a place of love and we speak of what we love about ourselves and our communities and our neighbors and the world around us, we will create heroes that are loved at some level by someone who recognizes the love within it.
Yeah, and what you're saying there reminded me of something about the kind of, I wouldn't say it's a golden rule, but it's a golden rule of writing, which is more like a suggestion, but a darn good one, which is like to consume media, to read. You want to write, I hope you've read some stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that I got reminded of is a quote from an actress. I forget her name. It's escaping me, but it's a quote that's important when she was talking about these new actors coming up, that a lot of them aren't actually into movies.
Yes.
Yeah, and then there's a lot of writers, I think, that may not necessarily be into literature. And it's hard not to be into literature without continuously running into the hero. Because the hero is probably the most... I don't want to say what's the appropriate word. The hero is almost like a default in literature, if you will. The hero is a pillar of fantastical literature and historical literature alike. Heroes exist in all plentheras of storytelling. And I think when we see these gigantic deconstruction of heroes, a lot of it is coming from people who don't really understand it to begin with. Maybe they've watched television as a kid and they've seen some cartoons with Batman in them, and they've seen what, a flick here and there. I think they kind of understand what it means to be a hero. So now we tear them apart. Or dare I say it, even more offensive, you try to write a hero and you have no idea what you're doing, and you create a very stale character. Because the only thing worse than a poorly written piece of work is one that reads dull and boring. And that's what I get from a lot of this stuff without a hero. It's no longer offensive. Now it's dull and boring. You see it all become this whole wave of brand new cliches we can add to the book of things we're tired of seeing. And it's leaving people wanting more of that old school hero. A lot of that old school pulp genre hero you used to get. Even in myself, I pull from old school heroes. Before I started writing, I did a lot of reading. And what I found out about half the books I was reading is, thankfully, I grew up in an era where they produced interesting television and movies. And a lot of the stuff I read, I was already fans of, because a lot of the stuff that they turned into multimedia was based off the classics. I found out, I'm an even bigger fan of say, Frankenstein or the Three Musketeers novel
Yes.
now than I was before. And now I already had an excellent introduction to it through years of adaptations of these multimedias. Adaptations, another thing that we discussed. I believe that was even our prior stream. If you guys haven't checked that out, check it out. It was a great conversation on adaptations. And this is another reason why adaptations are important. You need appropriate adaptation to keep these heroes alive, to retell it for that next generation without losing what's at its core. And we've gotten to this point where we throw out the hero with the bathwater, thinking somehow you're going to get some of these same magnificent stories. But the best stories are the personal stories, and they're always told through the eyes of a relatable protagonist. If you're talking about, in the genres of adventure, which I like to write in, you have to have a sort of hero involved there, or a likable character. And there's so little of this right now, it's beyond frustrating. So for people who wonder, do I need a hero? It's a magnificent place to start off with a hero. And in fact, I'd say a hero is probably the cheat sheet of it all, because heroes are relatable, heroes are likable, people love heroes. And if you can write a good one, they can stick around for a very, very long time, because we remember the heroes, and we also remember the villains, but that's usually because they're punctuated by the heroes.
Well,
Yes.
I think it's interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah. Now I was just about to say that. Why do people love heroes? Well, because people are saved by heroes.
That's right.
Of course, I love the heroes. If someone, like, let's say a firefighter, like firefighters know. If a firefighter comes into my house while my house is burning, God forbid, am I not going to love that man? Of course, I'm going to love him. So it's at least I'm going to buy him a beer. That's the least I'll go to. So yeah.
Well, I think that, and what really appeals to me about this is that we forget that this goes back aeons. It's not just us. It's
all the
way back to Gilgamesh. We go back to the hero as an icon. If you study Hindu literature, which I love Hindu literature, and the great Vedas and things like that, there's always a hero. The gods become heroes. In Greek literature, the gods are heroes. Norse literature, the gods are heroes. Everybody is an individual. They become epic in scale. They become larger than life because we love our individuals in there. So it's not just a manufactured thing. It's not just a cultural or a literary ideal. On the other hand, you have epic bardic tales of groups. And while those for a while, those had sort of fallen out of favor, where it's just a story about a people doing a thing. It's usually a story about an army, and there will be one individual or two that sort of leads it, but it's usually about a battle of some kind. The Battle of Red Cliffs, for instance, still has stories about the individuals that are involved. Very famous Chinese tale. But when we look at these, probably the greatest, I would say, example of this in modern culture right now is actually Warhammer. Warhammer being a story about just basically groups of space marines at that point. At first, the lore is really about the group. It's about who you are. When you started off with a Warhammer, it was about whether you were orcs or space marines, or you're a part of the Sisters, Sororitas, whatever you were part of a group. But no matter what you do, no matter where you go, somebody's going to throw individuals in there. And that's what happens with the Warhammer universe, is they start to, as people begin to fall in love with the lore, they began to create heroes out of the lore. I don't know if you could call Uncle Nurgle a hero, but he's an individual. You have heroes and villains. You have people that exceed just the group. They become in this case, they become the essence of the group. They become a distilled, whittled down version of it, an icon that becomes is representative of that particular culture. So each one has their own little heroes and their own little villains. Well, that's actually what we're doing in real life in cultures. We seek something that represents this ideal, that represents what we think is something we love. And so we turn to our superheroes, which is what Schuster and Simon actually created with Superman. You have him as that ultimate hero pre-war in a world that's chaos. He's bringing law and order. And it becomes this first real superhero because it seemed to be necessary to find someone that could exceed those expectations. And he goes back, actually, he is in the vein of Gilgamesh and the others. He harkens back to those days. And then you have, characters like Sergeant Rock or G.I. Joe or something where it's not really superheroes. They're just ordinary guys, but they have specializations that they become heroes because of what they can do and what they have learned, which I actually love the G.I. Joe arcs. These stories, as they relate to heroism and overcoming, are very representative of a group, but they are still individuals. Somehow they will always show up. What starts off as a group ends up being a story about an individual somewhere, which is why a great battle, when soldiers are recounting it, they will remember what their general said, what somebody said before. It's important. They need a hero. And then they become heroes themselves in their small scale battle, in their own internal world as they're fighting their way through this hellish landscape. They have their own heroism. And I know that because I heard my father tell the tales. And I'm sure that most of you have heard somebody speak of it. There comes a place where you become your own hero. You become who you always meant to be. When we learn how to take that group mentality and we whittle it down to this is the individual rising to be who he's supposed to be who she's supposed to be. That's the epitome of that hero's journey. That is the hero throughout their faces. Each one of us over the course of centuries and eons becomes that hero for a moment. And almost always the hero rises in defense of life, in defense of the values of the people that they represent, the good values. The true hero, as it has existed throughout the ages, rises in defense of the ones he loves or the ones she loves. And that will always overwhelm any story just simply being a god doing their own business and striking down people is not a hero. The hero is the one that rises. In most stories, it's not Zeus who's the hero, even though he's running around and making out with everybody and doing whatever he wants. The hero is Prometheus. The hero is the one that fights back and wins because he's bringing life to humanity. And I think we lose sight of that. And that's one of the things that so markedly represents the difference between true tales of heroism throughout the ages and the corporate propaganda that we see that's being put out to try to crush heroism, is that the hero rises from out of the group to become something special. And in that propaganda, the hero must fall back to fit into the group or he will be destroyed. And that is, there is a need to fit in. There's a need to be a part of a team and a machine. But in the end, every Marine, when they're told that they are part of that, everybody's a devil dog till the day you die. I have an uncle that was a Marine. I have my brother that was a Marine. I have people in the military right now that are, 101st Airborne and have Air Force veterans and Navy veterans and everyone else. Each one of them knows they are part of a machine and a team, but they're still the individual. They must become the hero they're supposed to be. That is the difference between the corporate culture you see, where in our case, the hero rises out of the group to become what he's supposed to be. In their cultural revolution, they want the hero to be pushed back down into the group to be what he is expected to be. And there's the difference.
And lick the boot. It's
Yes.
basically their hero is not a protagonist. It's a conformist bootlicker.
Yes. In the end of the
A yes man or a yes woman, or whatever pronoun they want. It's like they want to strip all individuality from literally everyone, so that the bulk of people would be these gray NPCs, basically, who each day can receive new corporate programming and be outraged about the current thing, and say whatever they have been programmed to say, and chant whatever slogans they are told to, and jump as high as they are ordered to, and just eat the bugs and own nothing, and be quote unquote happy. But that's not a. I mean, this will backfire tremendously, and it's already backfiring.
Yes.
Because there is like this across all cultures, because I have this background, studied culturology in the university, and after, so there is this common spirit among all humans everywhere. Doesn't matter if it's Asia, if it's Africa, if it's Europe, the Americas. Yeah, when you push people down, the harder you push them down, the harder they clap back. And it might not happen immediately. It might take some time, and there is something else, that the longer it takes, the harder the pushback when it happens.
Yes. One of the things I wanted to write in actually is that we have to start seeing that people who, some of your greatest heroes may come out of the machine. And those people, that has to be awakened in them, that what they are doing is serving a machine that seeks only to crush humanity. And in writing our heroes, the idea that we usually go towards a model of a young person comes out of a oppressed background to rise up and then fight back and to win, because a lot of our stories are based around people's own lives of coming out of those backgrounds, of people becoming just a simple farm boy to taking up the sword and then becoming Luke Skywalker. But it's always something magical in that background, or something that inspires them, stories of the tales of the past or whatever. But in this case, we have people who are in power, who are capable of seeing that what they are doing is damaging the world. They are capable of seeing it. They're capable of saying, wait, this is the wrong thing, and they have to move past it. One of the things, and it's part of Watcher of the Damned, and I wanted to write it in, is the Watcher himself actually was at one point a part of that machine. His whole point and why he was trained and what he did was he was there to crush that rebellion within the Lone Star State from inside, to go in and to try to work from it within, to make people do the right thing, because he was very committed to a cause. The reason why, because he was a high-functioning sociopath who was told that if he did what he was asked to do, he could do whatever he wanted, and he had been trained to. And we see this actually in our culture now. People are being cultivated to being sociopathic, to focusing on their own needs and their own wants. And the machine tells them, I will give you what you want if you do what I ask. Do what I ask, and I will give you what you want. You want power? You don't have to be a prisoner anymore. You can have some power. And this is how it worked in the prison at Kalesko. This is how it works, at Petatra. How it worked in most prisons around the world. You'll pick a prisoner that you think he wants a little bit more. They'll say, you know what? You can have some power. Do what I ask you, and I will make you a trustee. Do what I ask you, and I'll put you in charge of somebody. You just got to do this one thing, and I'll let you get away with some stuff. When you cultivate that in people, when you cultivate that need for that, you can have sociopaths actually do your bidding, because they are being allowed under a system of power to gain their power themselves. Those iconoclasts will actually flock to that. They will actually move towards that. And so the Watcher starts off, what people don't realize, there's an entire backstory that I've already written. It's actually out there. If you find it, let me know. And it's where he is part of that, not a villain necessarily, but just a gray moral person who goes through an extraordinary event that changes part of his perception about whether or not he really wants to be this. But in the course of those decades between that moment and the moment he's set free at the gate, there is an extraordinary transformation that occurs over a course of years of self-loathing, of doubt, of wondering if this is really what he ever should have done, of feeling like it's not worth it, that nothing was ever, that he still had that fire inside, but he was slipping away day by day. We go through this as human beings. There are places that the person who is a hero is not always start out as the hero, because they have gone through an experience where they tried to, like you said, tried to fit in for whatever reason. They were told that this is how it's done. This is what you have to do to be a good student. How many of us have heard that at school? If you're a good student, you'll sit down and shut up and you won't say anything when the teacher bullies somebody. Or you'll sit down and shut up when the bully in the class tells you that they'll hurt the teacher if you don't do what they want you to do. We learn to listen to bullies and we start backing up. And we decided we're going to get out of here. We're going to be our own man. You sometimes end up becoming a villain. That acknowledgement, when you realize I didn't really want to be that person, maybe this isn't what I want to do, maybe I'd like to do something different, requires people in power to realize that maybe they're not doing the right thing and they have to start doing it. Maybe they really are there to save the world instead of destroy it. When those people start stepping up and they start realizing, I want to do better, I want to be more, we need to inspire them to do that. We need to inspire them to say, you know what, you could be more than just what you're doing right now, lining your pockets and trying to crush the world. Maybe you would like to help us to regain freedom for humanity. Then we could actually start seeing some of that progress from on high. And I think that's possible in our stories as well.
Yeah. I think we really went deep this time.
Definitely. We're wrapping up soon. We're underneath 10 minutes before the stream ends.
Wow, that's went fast.
They usually do. They usually do. We all had plenty to say about the subject, I think. And we definitely covered a lot of ground. That's kind of why I chose this one. I knew we'd really go deep into it, into what it means to be a hero. And the importance of heroes as well. So, you know, and final messages to anybody out there. We're running down to the last about 7 minutes to go. So, Black Knight, what are your final words to our audience?
I would say look after the heroes that matter, that are not conforming and bootlicking, and follow their example. And if you're writing heroes, just write heroes. Write those who inspire you. Do not bow down to any fake progressivist, morally relative bullshit. That's because pretty much no one likes it. That's one, and two, it's useless. We can see with like all the major projects, like for hundreds of millions of dollars, we can start citing show after show that they are failing miserably. It's just go back to reality and don't do it.
All right. How about you, Snow? Final words to the audience tonight.
Well, I hope you can hear me because it sounds like I've got some interference here. Can y'all hear me okay?
You come through all right.
There is a
Might be a playback. Might be us coming
No,
through.
no, I think that's electrical issues. I've been having it sometimes
Yeah,
when the network is overloaded, like the
yeah. This it's
power.
actually it's actually the sunspots. There's a geomagnetic storm. It's kind of going down right now, but it's still
Oh,
affecting
yeah.
some of the communications. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
what I want to tell them first of all is thank you so much, chat, for being there for us. Yeah, love you guys so much. You're always such a joy, and all of our visitors and everyone that popped in. I like the cameos that are done. That's always so cool when they just show up and I'm like, oh my gosh! I saw Billy Bob Sack. I was like, oh my gosh. But for those who are watching in the future, and I want to say this, you need to be the hero. It's not enough just to want to write about it. You need to be the hero. If you're that author, what that's all you can do right now is write that story. Be the hero. Write that story the way you know it in your heart. Don't bend to the voices out there that are telling you you can only write a story a certain way, or you can only tell a story from a certain point of view, that you can't say what you really wish you could say. Write the story as you have it in your heart. Be that hero who shares that vision. We need you to share that vision. If you're not an author, if you're just a person doing your job every day, be the hero. You know what it is you have to do. You can rise. There is always a way for you to stand up and fight for what you believe in any situation. To be able to be the person who saves lives, who changes lives, who loves people, who does what's right. Sometimes a hero is just a person that comes up and hugs you when you need it. Be the hero, whatever way you were called to be. Don't leave it to someone else. Don't wait for someone else to be the hero. You are the hero in your own story, and you must rise.
Nice, exactly. I think that's why a hero's called a hero. They're the one that steps out of the crowd and goes far and beyond. I think you might actually have to mute yourself there, Snow. See if that might stop some of the feedback. It's a little hissy on that, but that's fine. If you want to check out any of the writers' stuff here, we all have Substacks. Black Knight, you have your wondrous Star Shatter series that is currently going on, and you're going to be wrapping it up soon, correct?
Yeah, I have pretty much the last 3 books left, and it's it's I mean it's just a matter of time. I am almost over the half mark of the 8th one, and there are 2 more. So, and I have all the drafts and everything. So it's just a matter of time. So yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, you've been working on your series for a while. So has Snow, who has unfortunately lost connection. But luckily, it didn't happen earlier. We wrapped up the entirety of our conversation. If you want to check out All Right Snow and a Watcher of the Dam series, our links down below, along with the Amazon link for the Black Knights literature. You'll be able to find it down there. My name is James Esparza. I'm a short story writer and myself. I have just finished up one short story that is going into editing production. Black Knight helped me give me some notes on it.
It was good. It was
so
good.
I'm going to be putting that together soon, and that's going to be releasing next month. Is a lovely spooky story. I know the Black Knight, you got one coming up yourself as well, which I had the opportunity to read, and it was also a very good read. But with that, we're going to go ahead and sign off. Thank you all for joining us. If you're rewatching this, even if you're watching this live, refresh it when it's off. Leave a comment down below. Give it a thumbs up. Share it with your friends. We'll be here next week discussing a wonderful plethora of multimedia topics that affect both culture and entertainment alike. Bye-bye now, everybody. We're out of here.
Bye.